Welcome, everyone, to the Lead Generation World podcast. My name is Michael Faree. Thank you for joining me again today. We've got a great guest. We've got Ethan Ewing from ProPair that's going to be joining us. Love bringing on Ethan because we get to talk a little shop, get to hear about the things that he is doing with ProPair, which is exciting stuff all around lead distribution, smart distribution, and optimizing where leads should be going to based on how their close rate is within a organization. So really, really cool stuff. We'll be bringing on Ethan in just a moment. Don't forget, we've got Lead Generation World coming up in January. Yep, we're holding an in-person event. We've got all types of safety guidelines that we put in place, and you can check that out at leadgenerationworld.com. And then click on the Orlando 2021 drop down. You'll see COVID guidelines and policies. We've really got it, I think, pretty buttoned up, and have got a lot of things in place that will ensure that every attendee and exhibitor is in the safest environment possible. So we're really excited to be able to put on an in-person conference, and we know that many of you are really, really excited to attend one. Be sure to register as soon as possible. Prices go up December 17th. So we got a couple more weeks to enjoy the lower price point. So make sure to register. Don't forget, it is fully guaranteed. So if the show does not take place, which it will, but if something happens where it has to be changed or moved or whatever the case may be, you can get your full money back guarantee. So I look forward to seeing you in Orlando and getting back together and kicking 2021 off on a good front or a good foot. So without any further ado, let's go ahead and bring Ethan in and start talking a little shop. All right. Welcome to the Lead Generation World podcast. I've got my good friend Ethan Ewing from ProPair with me. And, Ethan, I was just thinking, I try to grow this out a little bit, but now that I'm looking at myself on screen, I look like I'm just like a bum.
That looks very good. Looks very good, Michael.
You're clean shaven.
It looks very.
You got the clean shaven thing, which is usually my style, and maybe I'm gonna have to revert back to this.
I like it. Listen, it's the quarantine look for sure.
Yeah,
It's
it's either that or the homeless look. I don't know, one of the two. There's a fine line between those two looks. But anyways, it's good to bring you back on. It's been, I don't know, maybe 8 months or so since we last talked. And you've been busting your butt over at ProPair, growing a business and for the last couple years now. So for people that don't know what ProPair is, maybe just do a quick just summary of what you guys do, and then we can kind of jump in and talk a little shop.
Yeah, that sounds great. Yeah, great. Yeah, thanks for having me back. And yeah, it's been a wild 8-9 months here for sure. So ProPair, we're in the business of helping mortgage lenders automate how they assign leads, how they prioritize leads, and how they nurture leads. And we really do all that through our machine learning applications. So they're all real-time machine learning applications that are customized for each individual customer. And our whole thing is automating things that are happening today in the lead workflow, automating those processes, putting predictive decisions behind them, and improving overall lead conversion. And generally what we see, we talked about this in the preamble, you and I were just catching up, but generally we see 10 to 15% close rate increases across a specific use case. So for example, our ProPair Match product is the product that finds the best loan officers for a lead that comes in. So it does that in real time. And what we see generally is we always run a test and control group. So the control group will say convert at 5%, and then the test group will pick up an additional 10 to 15% in that group. So that's what we aim for. That's what we are able to deliver. And we'll talk a little bit more about some of the other things that we do along with that.
Yeah, definitely. I definitely want to dig into it. Let me just, since our last conversation, this whole pandemic thing started. I mean, I got to imagine, what I saw was people sort of just froze for a couple months, and didn't really do anything. How was it for you guys? I mean, being a sort of a SaaS platform that's helping mortgage companies, what was it like for you guys when this whole thing sort of broke out?
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking about that this morning. I mean, it's been like just for me personally, as far as how we're 4 years old. We rely a lot on deep relationships with our customers, and I think the really nice part for us has been that there's more humanity in the relationships. This is I grew up in Baltimore, and one of the cool things about living back east in a place where the weather's kind of not very good is the community is kind of galvanized and brought together by bad weather. Something as simple as that, or a bad football team, or a good football team. You kind of have these community bonds that tie people together and help develop empathy within the community. I think like at a national level, there's a lot of noise in the media and everything else, but I think at a national level, when you really do look at like human interactions we've had through this pandemic, there's that same thing, right? There's this like, hey, this is something that we're all dealing with, we're all facing. So whereas like, let's say, summer of 2019, cold calling a prospect or talking to a new prospect, and there's, kind of, okay, a little, it takes a little longer to build familiarity. There's a level of not distrust, but a level of, not a level of intimacy. That is, I think it's been much easier for people to open up and to look back on those, to kind of lean a little bit more on the empathy and develop relationships. It's huge for us because, like any software, there's a custom software, not an off the shelf, but a custom software, you rely on that level of transparency in the relationship. And so I personally think from that perspective, people working out of their house. I was on a call the other day, and you got like the guy on the other end of the call is, first his 4-year-old walks in the room, behind him, and then his 7-year-old walks in, and then his 10-year-old walks in. It's like, it's just, so
Yeah.
that level of empathy and understanding, I think has fostered deeper relationships and better relationships, and I think long term will be better for all of us. So.
Yeah, that's a really good point when you think about it. And I like the analogy of like either weather or the football team or whatever it may be. Those used to be conversations you pick up the phone and you try to even talk about to bond with somebody with. But now it's like, hey, we're all in this together to some extent. So we have that built-in empathy for each other and what's going on, and we already have that bond established, right? We don't have to fabricate something about, boy, the weather's horrible here, whatever it is, and talk about the weather for 5 minutes. Now we're talking about the pandemic, unfortunately, which, boy, sometimes you're like, I just want to stop, stop talking about this thing. But it's a really good point. But okay, so there is that. But from a industry standpoint, from your point of view, um, what did you, I mean, I think mortgage has been relatively unscathed because of the interest rates being so low, and these companies are still thriving, right? I mean, I don't
Yeah.
have my finger on the pulse like you do, but what was that like? You know, is that accurate? Of what's sort of been
Well, yeah, I
happening?
mean, there's two pieces, right? Like as a small business, and this, firsthand. I mean, your business is clearly, more impacted as well. But as a small business, that March April period was really, whoa, like what's happening here?
Yeah.
But the mortgage industry since April, May through current has really thrived, particularly on the consumer direct side, and just low rates have really driven that. And I think also, consumer direct lenders have invested significantly in technology over the last few years. The point of sale solutions, the Blends, the Roostifys, those are kind of the most visible part of that, and the one that gets the most press. But really, consumer direct lenders have been open and aggressively seeking innovation in the tools they use. And it started with Quicken, right? Everyone's kind of looking around, and Quicken has made huge investments in technology. And I think everybody in the industry kind of looks at that and says, you know what, we should do the same. And it left retail behind, it left wholesale behind. Mortgage brokers I know are fighting a good fight, but consumer direct lenders have gotten stronger and stronger. And so this period here where now the market gives them a real tailwind, is a chance for them to really blow up and take advantage of all the investments they've made. And, so like from our perspective, back to your questions, I don't want to go too far afield, but from our perspective, there's a there's when you have a belief that if you invest in technology and you invest in innovation and you try to get ahead, stay ahead, that attitude within the industry really helps us
Yeah.
because we're a very forward looking technology. We're you know we're creating something where there wasn't something.
Yeah.
And so, you need belief, you need credibility, you need your products to work. That's probably the most important thing. But ultimately, you need people to want to take the time to invest. So, mortgage has been really healthy. Our customers are doing very well. But then at a macro level, Bill Dallas, who runs Finance of America, who's an industry leader that I pay attention to for sure. He just posted the other day along with David Stevens, who's former head of the NBA. They were basically, Bill's kind of saying, "Hey, okay, everybody, you're going to have to start preparing yourself for when these rates go the other way." And every leader um, in the mortgage industry knows that's the case. They know they have to prepare, but it's hard to when things are so good. It is hard to prepare. So for us, it's our product works in good times, and it really works when things get a little leaner.
Yeah.
So that's why I've got this window just where it's, hey, let's keep investing in technology. Now's the time. You're doing really well. Make sure you have those investments so that when it comes out, be it next spring, next summer, next fall, when things get tougher again, you've now got the tools in place to take advantage or to
Yeah.
optimize your
Yeah,
business.
and that's really key, right? Is and I think the mortgage, and we may have talked about this too in the past. The mortgage industry has gone through these ups and downs, and it's becoming more aware of what's going to happen and the cycles and of interest rates changing and how that affects business and efficiencies and all that sort of stuff. So it's good to see, I think, people more and more planning. But I was kind of taking it back to the original question though. Did you find that companies sort of just froze? Maybe there are companies that you were implementing and you're like, everyone sort of froze for like a month or two, and are they all sort of kind of back now and things are running smoothly? Just from I'm just thinking of SaaS
Yeah,
platforms, not just
yeah,
yours,
yeah,
but companies where like this, nothing seemed to happen for a couple months because everyone
yeah.
didn't know. Is that what you guys sort of
Yeah,
saw
definitely
too?
it froze. I mean, I froze for like
Yeah.
3 weeks. I was like, "Whoa, go!" Yeah, we
Well,
froze.
right,
I
because you
reached
didn't
out
know
to.
how do you handle those sales outreach, right? I think there was a time where like you're like, do I pick up the phone and do I ask for this business? I mean, like,
Yeah.
how?
Well, so that's a great point. Okay, so that's a great point. So on the account side, on our current customers, I've reached out and did a lot of I was just listening to what other people are doing and hey, talk to your customers. And I spent a lot of time doing
Yeah,
that. But on the new side, I didn't start picking up the phone, honestly. Like I probably waited too long. I didn't start picking up the phone until the summer. I mean, it was like I went through like a 3 month kind of just taking a step back, and I probably, in hindsight, should have jumped back in earlier. But it was just strange, right? I mean,
yeah.
it was a difficult time to know what people wanted to hear and what they cared about, and whether you wanted to be sensitive to how people were responding. The reality was is everybody in mortgage got so busy that and so focused that I could have jumped in earlier without kind of making it. But I did have. It was interesting. Like um, we do annual contracts, and I did have I had a couple, in those first few weeks, a couple of contracts that were renewing, and so
Yeah,
it was,
yeah,
those kind of gave you a little, they worked out fine, but those were ones that were just kind of, you're like, on both sides, right? I don't
yeah.
know what's going to happen. They're kind of, so, yeah, it's been an interesting year for sure.
Okay, so things are back on track. When you look at you guys have been in business for 4 years, and I saw something you posted. I can't remember what it was, and it was like 8 million records, and I mean you're getting a ton of data that you guys are looking at on a regular basis. Did anything with the the changes in with the pandemic and pre-pandemic change the actions or the data or skew it all in any way based on people working remotely or anything like that? Did you see any like change, or is it always sort of a moving target?
All right, so there's like I could talk probably for an hour on that just that one 30
Yeah.
second question. So on the so just like straight head to head comparison, we did do analyses on pre-pandemic and
Yeah.
post-pandemic performance. So and again, everyone's if I always hesitate to give too much data because people then always say, well, what if, what about, but
Sure.
we looked at the 2.5 months prior, basically the first quarter, call it, of 2020 versus the next 2.5 months. And because what you have is you have that shift of people moving from the office to their home. And anecdotally, what initially we were hearing was, from our customers was, hey, things are, LOs are doing well. We're seeing good results. Everybody's behaving properly. So we dug in. I did analysis across nearly all of our customers and looked at individual performance. What we were looking for was outliers and things that were actually patterns, activities they were doing that were different from what they were doing before. Generally, you saw an improvement in conversion across almost all loan officers. So I think it was something like 80% of loan officers performed better
Wow.
in the post-pandemic environment, right? And now keep in mind, you're keeping that relative, right? Because you can't compare performance close rates from Q1 to Q2 because the market's different.
Yeah.
But you just look at their relative change, right? And so if a shop goes from 5% to 6% close rates, you look at actually how did individual loan officers perform relative to it. And nearly everybody was performing better. And honestly, you had 10 to 15% of loan officers. We saw this across almost every customer, a group of loan officers that fell apart.
Oh,
Like
so
that
there was a
just
group that there's a
they
group, but
just fell apart.
yeah. So,
And
so most of them, most of the group you saw an increase, but there were certainly individuals that just could
for sure.
not make it happen at home.
For sure. And then you go and you raise it with our customers to say, hey, and you'll say, hey, we saw a few that were underperforming. Of course, they knew the names, right?
Yeah.
They're like, oh, okay, it's so and so. So you're like, yeah, exactly. And so like, typically for us, the outputs are one thing, right? Close rates are one thing. Okay, great. I can, but what we looked at is then really is more deeply is now you're looking at your inputs. So how many calls are they making? What's the length of those calls? How quickly are they responding on their first call, their second call, their third call? You really start to say, when you see those trends and you see this change in behavior, the outputs are great. Everyone has a view of the outputs, but where we really focus is now on the inputs. What are the things that are changing that behavior, changing that performance? Because ultimately, all of our machine learning applications, these are predictive models.
Yeah.
So what they're doing is they're taking all those inputs and they're basically saying, okay, great. Based on what we're seeing, the math is going to say, here is the more likely outcome. Based on the inputs, here is the more likely outcome. So then our customers can then take that information, that prediction, and start to make decisions around what they can do to improve
Yeah.
close rates, nurture more deeply, accelerate more phone calls, maybe reassign that lead. So,
Well, I want to talk
I,
about two things. I want to talk because my guess is that there's technical inputs that like obviously you can calculate and you can address and show in your reports, but then there's also anecdotal things that are outside of what you can probably report on, right? Like moving into your house, like how long is that going to stay a factor? Is it going to wear off? Are there other processes that were put in place that maybe aren't included in the CRM or the LMS is what I'm trying to say. So first, let's talk about, I'm curious about those technical inputs. And then I'm also curious about your just anecdotal, what you sort of think, why people sort of were doing well, just, your own personal opinion. So the technical stuff, what sort of changed from an input value on the increase of performance when people moved into their homes outside of the office? Was it
Yeah,
lead
I mean,
quality? I mean, what was it?
well, what you were saying was we look at something called meaningful call. So it's,
Yeah.
you can, if they're all, 30-second calls with no activity, those are no meaningful calls. So what you were seeing is that you were seeing more meaningful calls happening more quickly,
Got it.
right? So generally and actually the call volumes went down. But as they were, and whether that's a condition of being at home or,
So the
deciding to call at better
outbound
times,
call volume went down. Is that what you're saying? But
outbound
the
total.
duration of the calls increased.
That's right. That's right. So they, whether they were timing their calls better, and again, this is why it's hard to, the market was part of that as well. Um, but the big flags you were looking for, from a sales administration perspective, basically, the sales managers are looking for, hey, are people staying with it,
Yeah.
right? And what you found is that just people generally were just working a little smarter, right? They were just working a, a little smarter, and you know, who knows? And I didn't revisit. We looked at that in the midsummer. I haven't revisited that, but like back to your point around the anecdotal. I mean, for um, for machine learning applications for models, what you care about are your inputs, the things that go into the model, the values. On a lead, you're talking about loan amount, where that lead came from, what that prospect is looking for. Those are all of your inputs. And what you're trying to develop with your customers is new features, right? Things that make a difference, things that will tell you whether a lead is more or less likely to close, things that will tell you whether a loan officer is more or less likely to have success with this particular lead, right? So those are the features, and you get those features by, you know, talking to customers, right, and understanding things like you mentioned, how long has this person been shopping for a loan?
Mm-hmm.
That's a nice feature, right? That will tell you, okay, well, if it's somebody that's been in market for a while, then they are maybe more likely to close with this group of loan officers than with this group of loan officers, right? That's a small feature that you learn from talking to your customers, and you say, okay, great. I now have a unique piece of data, and I'm going to put that into the model, and that the model ultimately is then going to give me just a slightly better decision. And not to get too technical on the model side, but my business partner, who is, he's the brains, he's everything. He's the guy that 10
Yeah,
years ago
we know
tuned me
you're the
into.
looks. We know you're the looks, and he's the brains, right?
He's the brain. He's I wish he's actually he's a handsome guy, but but 10 years ago he kind of tuned me in. We were talking about this problem, that I've been I think I sold you mortgage leads 20 years ago.
Yeah.
But I've been selling mortgage leads forever, and ran a business for years doing that. And so I would always, when I first met him 10 years ago, we'd talk about some of the challenges and why leads weren't converting as efficiently as they would. At 1% close rates, 0.5%. And he opened my eyes years ago to, hey, what everybody is sitting on is this tremendous data asset that is that sounds like, from his perspective, is vastly underused, right? And so I'd always just thought, hey, this is a process thing, right? This is making more phone calls,
Yeah.
sending more emails. I'm an operational. That's my approach. Like, okay, just configure things differently. And his approach was, hey, listen, let the data tell you where to go. Let the data dictate to you what you do. And you have to balance those things, of course, because there's an operational aspect to all this stuff. But that was that was like our aha moment, 6 years ago. And we just kind of said, shoot, let's go, there's so much data in the consumer direct world. Let's go put it to work, weaponize
Yeah.
it, and get it into production.
So,
So
So you have the lead data that you were talking about, right? Obviously, all the stuff that you get within the lead, location, loan amounts, all that sort of stuff. But then you also have success data, right? Results. Did the person, how many calls did they get? Like we talked about, like you just sort of alluded to. How does that sort of get combined? Like even duration of call, like do those things kind of get put into the algorithm as well with regards to learning what the whole recipe is for success, not just necessarily in the lead as well?
Yeah, so I'll give you yeah. So a really good example. It's a great question. A really good example that we did some studies in September around what we call styles. And so call styles are basically if you isolate if you say, hey, we're going to focus on the first call that a loan officer has with a prospect, not the third call, when they're calling to get documents. The first real call, the connection, not a voicemail. Or we're going to focus on that, and we're going to look at the duration of that call, right? Are they a chatty Cathy? Are they
Yeah.
spending a lot of time, or are they longer? And what you see is you see this, you see a profile, you just see this diversity amongst loan officers, and that's what you're looking for, right? In any valuable feature, you're looking for diversity. In do people have different tendencies? Are they a short talker? Are they a long talker? And then once you know that, you're able to quantify that, then yeah, now you have that. That now becomes something, a valuable feature, a valuable thing to know
Mm-hmm.
about that individual loan officer. So then, of course, you can then use it to determine which leads are going to be better for that loan officer, which leads to prioritize for that loan officer, when to reassign a lead to that loan officer, right? When to maybe even send something like an email nurture for that loan officer, and to try to get the prospect to call back in. So, the like you said, the data is kind of messy when you see it, but converting it into things that are meaningful and valuable and can be used in the models that's the fun part. It's the feature development aspect that our science team spends a lot of time with, and and customers are, it's cool because you can test hypotheses too. Hey, is this valuable? Is it,
Yeah.
are there really short talkers and long talkers? Yeah, there are. Right. Oh, that's cool. Okay, good to know. Can I use it? Yeah, we can help you. So,
Yeah, that's
um,
really interesting. I mean, I want to go back to a little bit about that sort of pre-pandemic and post-pandemic trends a little bit. But it should be noted that even when we talk in generalities, every company's certainly different, right? I mean, there's probably no, and certainly maybe people can sort of take away ideas and thoughtful things. But at the end of the day, one thing that may be applicable to one mortgage company may not necessarily be applicable to another mortgage company with a different team, right?
that's for sure. I mean, just in the we published an article recently with a couple insights, and one of them is that reassigned leads end up generating 26% of all closed loans when a lead is reassigned. Like,
Wow.
okay, yeah. So across the industry, that tells you, huh? Okay, well, I should probably be reassigning leads. Now,
What
when
do
you
we
drill down
find
to the
here?
when
That's
you read
interesting.
when you drill down to the individual customer level, that is, you've got some where it's 5 or 10%, right? And you've got others where it's 50%, right? So, you have to take the industry trends are hard for us to really kind of talk about too much, because everything is so customer specific. Another nice example of that is like, the speed to lead that businesses have built off, that we've been talking about, the Velocify study from, I think I mean, this is going to age us. I think it was like 2006. Like, it was like the
Yeah, it
speed to
was
lead
pretty.
study. It was
Yeah,
a while ago.
yeah.
So, but that's kind of gospel, right? And that's now that's an assumed thing, and it is indeed true, right? And I think their study was based on 5-minute increments, um, but the reality is that at the individual customer level, um, things aren't. It's not all speed to lead, right? You will see cases, sure, if you can contact a lead in the first 10 minutes and it's a competitive lead, you box everybody, or first 10 seconds, you box everybody out. Great. Quicken's doing that for the most part, right? They're in there, they got the pipe right in. They're on the phone quickly. They're trying to box people out. So what you do find is that at the individual customer level, that you find where your strengths are within that. You find that, hey, it's not, if I'm not first, that doesn't mean I'm last, right? Maybe
Yeah.
there's something, maybe there is a better time for me. And so, as much as you say, look, get on the phone in the first 10 seconds, great, do it. If you can do it, great. But if not, there's just tons of opportunity still. And don't let that lead now be, hey, I didn't contact him in the first 10 seconds, so I'm going to call him tomorrow, right? When you find those insights in your data and you figure out, okay, well, I didn't get this lead in the first 10 seconds, what next?
Yeah.
Right? That is now, so don't just hammer blindly at it. You didn't get it in the first 10 seconds. Now make another decision, right? And we're not telling our customers, hey, make that decision yourself. We automate those decisions, right? You didn't get in the first 10 seconds. Now, what are you going to do next?
Man, so much there. So you mentioned earlier speed to assignment. Is that is that the same as speed to lead, or is that different?
Yeah, I think I use it as a proxy for, there's speed to assignment and speed to contact attempt. So generally, the way most of our customers are configured, they're all in automated, dialer software generally. So when a
Yeah.
lead comes in, it's kind of one and the same.
Okay.
Um,
I
yeah.
was just kind of curious and then about that reassigned, stats that you said, you've got some people or consumers that absolutely do not want to be reassigned. They stick with someone they're familiar with or whatever reason. And then there's some that are very, very successful with it. And my guess is that there's reasons why they're being reassigned, right? It's because one, they're down the funnel and they're stagnant. Maybe the loan officer's too busy, has too many leads, so it has to be reassigned. I'm sure there's a lot of factors there, but I'm kind of curious just to open that box up a little bit more and just kind of maybe, is there stuff you can share, just anecdotal stuff that's about reassigning, why you think sometimes it works, why you think it doesn't work, and what situations sort of make it conducive for it to work better to reassign people?
Yeah. So as a rule, I would say reassign leads as a high
Yeah,
level.
but when though,
Yeah.
right? Because obviously, one thing is you have to make sure that your loan officer team understands that, hey, you don't own this lead. You got this amount of chance to be successful with it. It's going to go somewhere else. You're going to get somebody else's leads. It's going to go,
Yeah.
potentially around
Well, you
the
nailed it right there, right? Like it's a cultural thing. I mean, that that
yeah,
that 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 piece right there. So when I say, hey, reassign leads, that's not for every ship. We have a bunch of customers and a bunch of prospects that would go, no, I'm not going to do that because that's just not my culture. So,
yeah,
again, every shop is different in how they treat things. Generally, what we look a lot at lead receipt to lock. How long does it take to get a lock? You can have different milestones in there, but that's a reasonable lock. And you see that, 70% of those locks are happening in the first 7 days, right? On average. And it varies across customers, but that's generally what you see. And so, if you look at different lead sources now, some lead sources are quicker to get locks, right? Like you're going to get more of those locks in the first 3 or 7 days, and some take a longer time, require more nurturing. So, like a good example of what you're saying there is if you've got generally let's say an average loan officer who pulls 70% of their locks in the first 7 days, but then if they've got now a lead from a specific source that generally pulls through more quickly, and they don't pull through that source as quickly, well, that, hey, maybe after 7 days, that's a really good lead to reassign if they haven't locked it, because you're saying typically these sources pull through more quickly. They are underperforming relative to that and relative to themselves. So this is one I think will have a better odds. And again, this is
yeah,
card counting, right? This is about odds. You're not trying to,
yep.
you're just trying to make a slightly better decision. Better odds if we reassign that particular lead. But yeah, you can't, like you said, like you can't. I will never force reassignment on anybody. It's like if
Yeah.
culturally people have to be okay with that.
So is your assumption on the reassignment, like in a scenario like where a lead that normally closes or locks within 7 days isn't locking? is your assumption that it's maybe a personality connection between the consumer and the loan officer, and that's why potentially those reassignments can work?
That would, yes. I mean, that's the
Just assumption.
that's the
Yeah.
story. I mean, that's why I got into this. But when 4 years ago, when we said, hey, take this, like that was my dream, is like, hey, there's a situation where if a prospect decides to go with a lender and they like the rate, they maybe read some reviews and they say, hey, this lender seems like a good fit for me, I'm going to call them. Or they take a call from them and I'm going to choose this lender. They like the lender. If they get a loan officer that they don't resonate with, like it's a shame for that lender to lose that loan just because there wasn't a good fit between the prospect and the loan officer. You've got 100 other loan officers in your shop, right? Like give that prospect another voice, a different face, another tone, another style.
Yeah.
Like a lot of what we spend our time on the feature development side is understanding styles and understanding how that then impacts the interaction with the prospect. Like that's the really fun and exciting, that's the fun and exciting stuff.
Yeah. I mean, it's almost like it'd be interesting to do like some like personality tests on each of the LOs and put it into this system as well, right?
Yeah,
Although
we've
you
done
probably,
them. We've done them. We've done personality tests on for a few of our customers. We've not put it into. We've actually never put it into production and released that as a feature, because part of it is it's a challenging feature, but the other part is there's so much in the the actual lead data, the temporal data, the activity data tells you so much, almost like so much more, right? Like it's the personality thing is super. It's actually very revealing, but it tells you so much more. They're actually what they do and how they treat leads and how they behave, gives you just a ton of information. So that's where we end up focusing, is on the activities.
yeah. But is there, and I'm not trying to say you would exclude other personalities, right? Because I think, there's always, a match with some consumer, no matter what your personality is, but there probably is one that rises to the top a little bit. And to be able to know that and build a sales team around that type of person,
Yeah.
that you can identify, and you can have them take a test and go, okay, this is the guy we're sort of looking for. And it sounds horrible, because I'm sure I probably wouldn't fit in. I would never get a job. I just don't fit into that personality trait. But it would be interesting, to see how that applies across a statistically relevant batch of successful people that close leads, and what that personality is.
Yeah, it is awesome. It's to your point, man. It is, everybody's so different. I mean, loan officers behave differently. They are different. They like different things. And obviously same on the prospect side, but we focus more on the loan officer side. And that variance is huge. Now, when you look at let's say the top 10% of loan officers in every one of our customers, they're all going to look different. Like they all have, obviously the data shows you who the stars are, but they'll all look different, and they're all good for different reasons. And some customers evaluate, some customers put more of a premium on efficiency, some put more of a premium on volume. But like you said, like you see these patterns, when you unpack when you really dig into the data of a loan officer and how they perform, and rather than just focus on their outputs, the inputs are just incredibly compelling. And then the ability then to use those inputs to try to make them more effective, and to try to give them, more swings at fatter pitches, to try to help them prioritize their lead queues, to try to help them tell them which leads to follow up with. Like that's where now you can use it, right? It goes beyond being, oh, that's really cool, to being, okay, great, I'm going to put this now into use and show you how to use this to improve overall close rates. So Yeah, they're different. I mean, I don't. I mean, I think you were a weren't you a loan officer way back when at LEI? I lost your mic. I think I lost your audio, Mike.
There you go. I'm back.
Oh, there it
I
is.
muted
Okay.
myself. I was a loan officer actually for maybe a year. Uh, and it went okay, but I wasn't,
Got into marketing. You
wasn't
moved to
quite.
marketing.
Yeah. Yeah. I moved behind the curtain, which is
Yeah.
probably by the looks of people watching this on video, not just listening to, is where I belong, with this, scruff. But, yeah. So, I tried my best in those days, and I think I closed a handful of loans, but
Yeah.
that's about it. Wasn't quite paying the bills.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
listen, the reason why I wanted to bring you on here, unfortunately, we only got about 10, 15 more minutes. And I'm looking for people that are watching. I'm looking over at the ProPair LinkedIn page, which is one people should check out, because you have some articles on here. And one of them that I reached out to you, I was like, let's get back on a call. And it was ProPair shares mortgage industry lead management insights. Maybe if you don't mind just kind of sharing a little bit about what that post was. Do you recall to which one I'm referencing?
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. So that one, we really looked at the power of, again, not to promote the reassignment, but we looked at
No, please do. Yeah.
the power of reassigning leads, and what that can mean for a business. And that, basically, in this, this market's a little interesting in that there's so many leads coming in, that reassigning leads is not necessarily something that the customers need to do, or that they're looking to do. But as the market tightens up, leads tighten up. Reassigning leads, is proven. I mean, we're saying more than a quarter of your locks are coming from leads that have been reassigned.
Yeah.
So it's a very powerful thing to do. And and then the other point was really around, getting, once that lead comes in, you're focusing on getting that lead. If you don't make that contact within, or that first call attempt within 10 seconds, there's plenty of other good sweet spot times to make that contact. And those are things, I touched on a little bit earlier. But there's, inside of your data, and anybody that's, if you're a mortgage lender, how much data you have, both activity data, lead data, loan officer performance data. It's really hard for customers to um, to be able to set aside the time to really take advantage of that asset. And so, like, the fun part of what we do, and we built this data infrastructure that gets customized for every customer, and you can pull all those data sources in, and then you give them the ability, and we analyze individual customer data, but you give them the ability to now to see that data in a new way.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're basically looking at it for insights. What does my business look like? Where are the opportunities to do better? And that's just data analysis.
Yeah.
And so we pull out data trends. Like when we publish stuff, generally it's going to be, hey, Mike, like, this is happening across the industry. These are some really cool things we're seeing. You got to, if you don't call that lead early, keep calling it. If you get a lead that's not closing and it should be, reassign it. Those are good industry trends, but the real magic happens at, like anything else in life, at the local level, right? At
Yeah.
within each shop. So, go ahead.
Well, so I got totally get your point, because like we said, earlier, is that, it really just depends on, each organization, right? While there are anecdotal things, that don't necessarily mean they're going to be, home runs for you as well. But despite that, I'm still going to ask you this
Yeah.
question. In this article, you talk about, which you just touched on, was, if you don't get it immediately, doesn't mean you're not gonna have success with it. And I think you mentioned that sometimes people put the follow-up, they push it too far out. So again, I know this, we're probably I'm asking you for a specific answer that may not be specific to everything, but is there sort of a general follow-up process, timing that does sort of make sense? What have you seen that's too far out? What have you sort of seen that does make sense?
Well, so what I've seen is once you get past an hour,
Yeah.
you start to see for that initial call, that you start to see real degradation.
Yeah.
So
So,
keep that.
so does that mean you're calling you if you don't get it within the first minute, you're calling it back? So you're just continuing to try within that first hour?
Yeah, for your first, yeah, absolutely. Like try to get that first contact within the first, that first call,
Yeah.
or actual contact within that first hour.
Yeah. And then reassignments, is
Even
that,
better in the first 10 minutes.
yeah, what's that?
Even better than the first 10 minutes.
Yeah, yeah. And then reassignments, timing wise, is there a time, is it 7 days? Is that, I know you sort of alluded to that earlier, but is that sort of what you're seeing too? Is if something is stuck with somebody for 7 days and there's no movement, which I think you probably have to be really careful about what those triggers are, right? Because you don't want to incorrectly reassign something.
Yeah.
And at the same time, you also don't want to probably give loan officers the ability to freeze that lead and hold on to it as well. So so two questions.
Yeah, it's great. Go ahead.
Two questions. Is there sort of a sweet spot? Is it 7 days if something isn't moving? And then how do you sort of manage that ability to hold something if they really truly need to hold it versus, reassigning things blindly to some extent?
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, all the nuance that's in there is
Yeah.
all those considerations makes it difficult. But yeah, I mean, if you're not reassigning a lead within the first 7 days, then basically it's an age lead, right? Because then it's just kind of sitting around, and you can kind of move it at will. But whatever you it is such a cultural thing. So we have customers that just don't reassign leads,
Mm-hmm.
and they do, and they're very strong performers. And so is that an effect of the fact that they don't assign leads, and so loan officers take more ownership in those leads? Well, I can make a very compelling case, and I have to them that, hey, if you reassign these leads, you will produce X number more closes. Like that's just what the data says. So it is a cultural thing. But but like anything else, prospects are in the market for a relatively they're in the market for a long time, but they're in a competitive market for a relatively short time. So I'm a fan of, if you're going to make a decision, make a good decision and make it quickly. And what we're able to do with our tools, and the reason I'm kind of it's self-interest in reassigning leads is, like, we automate these decisions, right? Like, we're giving you information to not just make, hey, shoot, I think I should reassign leads after 3 days. Okay, well, great. Well, that, years ago, right, in the old world, that's okay. Hey, if you don't make a certain number of calls or have a certain call duration, then we're going to reassign that lead after 3 days. Well, that's great. Okay. But that, within a short amount of time, loan officers are going to game that. If you can instead automate that decision and make that decision now based on the information that you have at the time of that proposed reassignment, you're going to make better decisions. Like, you just are. I mean, that's just math. You're now using the data. So that advantage is what we take advantage of. I mean, that's all it is. So you move away from all those fixed rules that you put in place that maybe you forget about, that sounded good at the time or worked well at the time, and you move now to these automated predictive decisions that you can set and forget, and they will get better over time. They will change with market conditions. So that's what we do.
That's awesome. So it really is awesome and really so powerful. And it's exciting. And for mortgage folks, and I kind of feel bad for other industries that you guys aren't working in yet, because there's there's so much power to being able to utilize data like this, right? And make smarter decisions and close more sales. So really, really cool stuff. So I'm not going to keep you any longer. How does someone get a hold of you to find out more and learn more about what you guys got going on?
Yep. Yeah. But like you said, the LinkedIn page is a great place. You can get me through there. Ewing, EEWING at ProPair, PROPAIR.ai. But yeah, LinkedIn is great. And we've got our own website. Actually, we're going through a website revamp right now to refreshen that thing. Yeah, that's it.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate it. I'm going to do everybody a favor and log off and go shave. And I hope to see you soon, man. Let's touch base again. Hopefully after the new year, in 2021. Hopefully 2021 will be a much better year for everybody, not just business wise, but personally for everybody. And look forward to talking with you again.
Well, I really appreciate you, Mike. I mean, you've been you're just a great voice for the industry, and I just appreciate how much you do for us and how hard you're working and grinding through what clearly is a really difficult time. It's a pleasure to call you a friend. I just love what you're doing and keep doing. Look forward to seeing you soon. And Orlando will kick butt. So that's it's great to see you out there doing it and pushing the envelope and meeting a need for a ton of people to get out and be out there. So
I appreciate it. I appreciate it. And all right, good stuff. Well, I'll talk with you then or later.
Thanks, Mike.
All right.
See you, man. Bye.